Good evening, welcome to Plain Talk. Today's show is going to touch on topics that we are overdue to discuss as a nation. David Rudder said, how we vote is not how we party. That's a conversation that is a statement that by itself is not a compliment to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. And we hope to drill down into what exactly is at work here when we come back. Welcome back, and to get right into the meat of the matter, let me introduce the panel that's having this conversation. To my right, she is a social media influencer and an activist in her own right. She is Shalana Williams. To her right, he is the Trinidad and Eastern Caribbean representative of Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. He is David Mohammed. Tony Defoe, Deputy Political Leader, and Chairman of the Progressive Empowerment Party, Felicia Holder.
Good day.
So, welcome everybody. And as usual, the first couple minutes of every Plain Talk is so calm as everybody feels the waves of the conversation is about to start. This one is not going to be easy. And I'm going to throw stuff on the table and hope that relevant people contribute to it in a meaningful way. Because there is no contradicting the fact that the grandchildren of Africa in Trinidad and Tobago have been left behind all of the other races in their development. They lead the pack in all of the negatives in society. People incarcerated, people wanted before the courts, people hooked on drugs and homeless. And having a political party in this country, and all of this I want to conflate together and throw it outside there because, this is our facts. These are our facts. There's a political party in Trinidad and Tobago that's had about 80% of our political leadership, social, financial, economic control, political control of the country for about 80% of the time that we've been independent. They consider themselves a black party. They sell themselves as the representative of Black Trinidad and Tobago, a counterfoil to the UNC's East representation of East Indians. To the PNM represents Black Trinidad and Tobago. And if they've had control of the economy and the politics and the treasury for all this time, why would the grandchildren of Africa, and I'll keep referring to it until somebody tells me what's the correct, politically correct term nowadays. David Mohammed, I want to ask you first, touch that thorny subject.
Well, it is multi-layered. I don't think the PNM as a party represent themselves as a black party, even though it is said of them from time to time. They may on occasion do that.
Could I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
If Fitzgerald Hines is a spokesperson for that party, and he would speak to people in racist, seditious terms, talk about cutting the dreads off a little Rasta boy who kissed the hands of, I think it was Kamala Prasad, who says, I don't keep track of the bacchanal that takes place in these parties. When you look at the racist makeup of who is put to front, I can't say who operates or owns the party, because they are a different demographic altogether. And at the highest echelons of the PNM, there are no black faces besides the current Prime Minister. But media, and I'm giving it back to you, when you go on media, especially the Progressive Empowerment Party that 3 years ago formed itself into a political party, the media challenges you on who is going to vote for you.
Right.
Because the base of the PNM is Black Trinidad and Tobago, and the base of the UNC is Indo Trinidad and Tobago. So how then If you're saying that the parties don't make that claim themselves, how did this become our reality?
Right. It has become a reality based on that term right there, the homonym, base. But there is a relevant historical background to this, and that is that we started off, of course, with a cabildo, the rulership under the Spanish, and then after the cedule of population in 1784 and the fear of the British taking over Trinidad, Trinidad was populated by French Catholics. And then in 1797, Sir Ralph Abercrombie did actually spearhead the takeover of Trinidad. So Trinidad became a British colony in 1797.
Just gear back a little bit to the cedule of population.
Right. Well,
talk that because it's
yeah.
very
It's very
to this.
important. Because if we go back to the year 1783, all of these surrounding islands to Trinidad had bigger populations than we were, even though they were a lot more smaller geographically. So you had Grenada, Antigua.
Tobago.
Yeah, but
Tobago was a cocoa player at that time.
right, yes. So Tobago, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, St. Kitts, Barbados. All of them had larger populations than Trinidad and Tobago. Our population was 5,500 up to
Well, at that time we were
1783.
just Trinidad.
Right, Trinidad, yeah. So in the habit of including Tobago. And one of the reasons for that is because slave plantations and estates weren't established here because of the myth that Trinidad was El Dorado, the land of gold. And so the first enslaved Africans that came to Trinidad came in 1592 from Spain, who were Muslims, descendants of the Moors of Morocco. And they were searching for gold.
When they were still slaves.
Yeah, they were enslaved
And
Africans.
who were controlling the search for gold?
Captain Antonio de Berry on behalf of the Spanish crown.
Right.
And then, of course, that didn't happen. We had a pretty thriving cocoa industry. But up to 1783, there was fear that the British would take over Trinidad because all around us were British islands, British West Indies. And so the cedule of population was to populate Trinidad, to fortify our numbers to be able to withstand an attempted invasion. So,
Say in more detail
mhm,
how you got land. One of the criteria of the cedule of population
yeah.
was the amount of Africans you owned.
Right, yeah,
You're
right,
getting to
right,
that?
of course.
All right? I just don't want you to gloss over that.
No, but that's a main feature.
All right.
Right, so cedule of population is passed in 1783, and the invitation was to French Catholics who came mainly from Martinique, Guadeloupe, a few from Haiti, and also from France itself. And of course, inclusive in those, one of the factors that complicated Trinidad's race and ethnicity history is the fact that there were Africans who were freed in French colonies or mulattoes who owned slaves, and they came to Trinidad. So that put Trinidad in a much more complicated ethnic makeup than anywhere else probably in the entire hemisphere, with the exception of maybe just Haiti, because you had the Spanish who came in 1592, you had the Dutch who sold the first enslaved Africans to Trinidad in 1619, then you had the French coming in 1783, then of course the Chinese in 1806, Syrian and Lebanese in 1902 and 1906 according to the Angostura History of Trinidad book, because there are numerous accounts of that. And then of course the East Indian community came in 1845. So
The Chinese between them.
yeah, I said 1806, Chinese 1806. But of course, that was just an early wave of an attempt at an indentureship scheme. The
Yeah,
bulk
it
of the
didn't work-
Chinese
it didn't
came.
work
Yeah,
with the Chinese.
bulk of the Chinese came around the same time as the East Indians. So with that now, and then 1838 emancipation taking place, you had a situation where the law had to be based on race. And the law was British law. And one of the first laws that were passed was squatter laws. Because of course the Africans left the plantations. We established what the University of the West Indies called peasantries, independent communities where we grew our own food, built our own homes, started susus or pyramid schemes, credit union type structures of financial institutions, and education circles. So we were needed back on the plantations. So one of the first laws that were passed were the squatter laws.
But you might need it back on the plantation.
Because you had plantations that were
Free men
once, yeah,
Exchanging labor for money.
right. Well, it's almost the same thing. It's almost the same thing.
But it's also not, because slavery
Yeah.
and having the right to quit a job because you need it back on your
Yeah,
plantation.
but laws were written to ensure that you don't quit the job. Because one, if I leave the job and I go and live somewhere else where I was kidnapped and brought, because we didn't sign up, we didn't volunteer for slavery, we were kidnapped and brought here. And so if I leave the plantation and go to live in the country, I'm breaking the law because I'm a squatter. I'm living on land that I didn't pay for. And then when some Africans started to pool together monies to purchase the land, they passed another law, Lord Glenelg, who said the minimum purchase of land could now be 340 acres. So some Africans pooled money together to buy 340 acres of land, which is half a square mile. They changed the law again, this time 680 acres, a full square mile. Then they passed a law, they passed the Habitual Idlers Ordinance, whereas if I wasn't working on a plantation, I'm idling, and that's against the law. They passed the Master Servants Ordinance of 1846, which interestingly was repealed in 2011, which placed restrictions on African people being landowners and entrepreneurs. So racism...
What was the impetus for that repeal?
I remember I was actually in a studio doing an interview, and then there was a pause for the break, and then a news item came on where there was a meeting between the OWTU and the then Prime Minister, Mrs. Prasad Bisasa. And they came out of the meeting and had a joint press conference announcing that they just repealed the Master Servants Ordinance of 1846. But you know those laws, somebody flying the kite, swimming in the Maraval River.
Kicking a tree.
Right. Leaving the country and not telling the transport authorities where your car is and all of that. So racism started in the law, and that is the backdrop from which we have race in politics today. Now, just fast forwarding.
But you see, and I need to interrupt you again, because you went from the plantation, the official slavery plantation, to the, I want to say, the communal plantation. I mean, they still had very restricted rights, but they had rights at that point in time.
Yeah.
But we were influenced still by the culture of the plantation.
Of course.
The different hierarchies and different castes that still influence Trinidad and Tobago's society.
Right, and that's why we have philosophers like George Beckford, Lloyd Best, Carrie Levitt, who have written about the plantation economy and the plantation society, and the fact that one of three main social structures of Caribbean societies, in addition to Creole society, plural society, is the plantation society. So even though the formally legal process of enslavement has ended, the nature and culture of slavery capitalism has continued. Hence, Dr. Eric Williams published in 1943 Capitalism and Slavery. The two are so closely intertwined that we actually have a plantation economy. But fast forwarding to 1925, where we were now allowed to vote for the first time ever. But not all of us. You had to be male.
Landowning.
Right, you had to own land. You had to be able to speak English. Because remember, Trinidad was arguably... Right, but a French-speaking country. And for those of us who have elder, maybe a great-grandparent or so, grandparents in my case, they could probably still speak French, which we call patois, in the same way that, so our broken French is called patois, in the same way that Jamaican broken English.
So you say the modern society starts with the vote?
With the vote.
Modern Trinidad society.
I wouldn't even use the vote as a demarcation point of it.
But if you could have a say in the governance of the country, because it wasn't that much of a say anyway.
Yeah.
Because you were still limited in what you could vote for.
Right.
And to make yourself available for representation of the people and stuff. Those things were still limited. But you had some say. Would you say that 1925, I don't want to bore the audience, and I don't want to bore the audience people sitting on the table, but would you say that 1925 was the start of modern Trinidad society?
No, definitely not. It made almost no difference whatsoever. What I would say is 1946, when there was full adult suffrage, when everyone could have now voted, that may have been more of a turning point. But again, the question is why? Again, race in politics. Because the reason that full adult suffrage was passed in 1946 was because 100 years up from slavery, there was a wave of labor riots all across the region. In Kingstown, St. Vincent, Bridgetown, Barbados, Georgetown, Guyana, Fyzabad, Trinidad, all over. And many of these labor uprisings were led by labor unions that became political parties that gave the first prime ministers to many countries. Alexander Bustamante in Jamaica, he was a labor leader. He was put in jail, come out of jail, protest, go back in jail. He was the first prime minister. Chedi Jagan in Guyana, he was a labor leader. Eric Gary in Grenada, GULP, Grenada United Labour Party, all of them were trade unionists. We, on the other hand, we had a scholar, Dr. Williams, whereas
he was still challenged by parties like the...
Right, Uriah Buzz Butler, so the British Empire Workers' Party. So he would have been, if Trinidad had followed the same model as all of the other Caribbean islands, English-speaking Caribbean, then Uriah Buzz Butler would have been the first prime minister. But the thing is, the main point is that the reason full adult suffrage was passed was because of this commission of inquiry called the Moyne Commission, which spanned the Caribbean, inquiring on what could we do to prevent these kinds of uprisings. And the conclusion that they came to was, if we let the masses vote, then when there's unrest or rebellion or revolution, they would redirect their venom towards their own people who were now elected and put into political office, whereas before all of the politicians were white. And even after full adult suffrage, you still had that lingering pattern. You had it in Jamaica, you had it in St. Lucia, to a lesser extent in Trinidad with the POPPG. But all the politicians were white. So the Moyne Commission felt, if we let all the black people vote, then if there's an uprising to take place, the uprising will be against another black person, which is what happened in the 1970 Black Power Revolution. Dr. Eric Williams was seen as the figure who had to answer the questions. And so race in politics has always been a factor.
Okay, but 1970, if you get to 1970 and you say we're independent in 1962, we still remember the Commonwealth, the Queen is our head of state, but we have control over our legislature, yes?
Yes.
From 1962, independence meant you could write your own law.
Yeah, but technically from
we did that in
1976
when we wrote a Republican law that replaced the Supreme Law of the Constitution of 62.
Right, so we introduced a Republican
Constitution. But I want to ask you this. You say that they march against a blackface, but you say it almost as if in 1970 it was symbolic. But between 1962 and 1970, the People's National Movement had the authority to make the changes that were made post-1970 anyway.
They could have, but there were so many impediments in place. For example,
things like chambers of commerce and organizations that saw the organization of the people based on their role in society. Because I tell Trinidadians and Tobagonians all the time, there is a sector of Trinidad and Tobago that view people as labor, consumer, and voter.
Right.
Yes?
Yeah.
And that is the importance of their power to the conversation. I just want to bring the other three people into the conversation.
But let me just conclude on one point, which is that...
Just bringing it back to it, I just wanted to give them the opportunity to weigh in what they've heard so far in so much as how it interacts with, how it affects their...
Yeah, but just 1 year before independence, in 1961, Dr. Eric Williams gave a speech at the University of the West Indies entitled Massa Day Done. And in that speech, he encapsulated the fact that, yes, we're about to become independent, but the owners and controllers of the commanding heights of the economy and the capitalists still have so much domination over decision making that it's something that he called upon the nation to resist. And it's the same thing with the so-called 1% today.
But that's still nonsense.
But maybe so.
But
he identified the fact that there are those influential persons who can manipulate the decisions made by politicians.
Yeah, but Lloyd Best broke it down for Trinidad and Tobago when he said political control is control of the police and the cash register. And who controls those two things say everything. Taxation and legislation is the way you control an economy. Yes?
Right.
So to say that Eric Williams and the PNM then abdicated full responsibility to blame others at a time when the same Eric Williams used untrammeled power to steal private property and nationalize it. Remember that time?
Well, I can't say that.
When we created Petrotrin, I want to link the invention of Caroni Limited out of Tate and
Dr. Eric Williams wasn't alive when Petrotrin was created, though.
Who was responsible for the nationalization of all of the oil companies that became Petrochem.
Right. Now that happened under the political structure. And then when the merging took place, of course, it was the fact that we had abandoned Texaco and Shell.
We just
on.
acknowledging
Right.
that the government of the day had the power.
Yes, they did. And
So
they
the
should have done
Massadet
better
Dunn
with
speech,
it.
the Massadet Dunn speech
Yeah.
was lazy politicking.
I take it as a warning by the fact that this is being said before 1 year before independence. It's like the politician would never go on a stage and tell the people before they vote, listen, we're about to experience hard times, you'll have to tighten your belt, we're going to introduce more VAT, we're going to raise the cost of living, and we're going to make life more difficult for you, but we want you to hold our
Yeah, but
hands.
Trinidad-
They never say that before you vote for them, but they'll say it after you
the
vote for them.
fact.
So I credit Dr. Eric Williams in giving the Massadet
but
Dunn
he-
speech
no-
before
No,
independence.
but that was classic politicking, and he was creating a bogeyman. Massa was a bogeyman.
But Massa was real.
No, but Massa was also a bogeyman that didn't exist when he put that yoke around your neck, because he's put a yoke around all Trinbagonians necks, especially black Trinbagonians, who took that to mean not economic controllers, but white skin in general. I'm not serving you juice by the pool anymore. And it robbed us of opportunities to develop the nation in our service industry. That yoke Massadet done, many have tied to the reason why we are so poor in our publics, in our service, in
In
all
tourism?
in all of our service. But I wanna
That's one interpretation.
and we're gonna
of
come
it,
right
yeah.
back to it,
Okay.
but I wanna Tony,
Well,
a wealth of information there to start the ball rolling.
I tell
And a
you,
Yeah.
nice history lesson.
Mr. Mohammed, yeah, I feel like I was in school this morning today, boy. But very, very good information, and it's just interesting to know how our history really is and what is being dispensed, especially to the young people, because those are the minds that we have to have heavy influence on, especially now in this present time in our history, in our nation's history for that matter. Because again, we need to see where is our country actually going to go. You know, what is the real national agenda for Trinidad and Tobago and its citizens, let's say for the next 50 years, the next 100 years. The Chinese government, they set their agenda 100 years, every 100 years, you know, and they have checkpoints throughout that time frame in knowing where they are and where they fell short and what they need to do in order to meet the goal. There has not been a leader thus far that has set a national agenda.
We've been splashing around.
Exactly.
And that's what he
Exactly.
said, because we've been reacting. All of the dates that David called are reactions to something else before. We've not had a development plan for a nation state, Trinidad and Tobago, where all of the people knew what we were trying to be. Have you ever heard of such a thing?
Well, you know, I mean, you have like things like
Vision 2020. No, I'm not talking about
Yes.
that, but you do
Which are
Yes.
still relatively short term
Yeah.
in comparison.
No, but a
to-
lot could have
Felicia
been done in
Holder,
that
chairman
period
of
of
the
time.
Progressive
Yeah,
Empowerment
a lot.
Party. You,
Yeah.
what do you think? We're up to 1970. That's where we are in the conversation. We're about to get real, but we're up to 1970. A lot of the things that had to happen for us to be the country that we are led to that point.
Yeah.
So going forward from there. But what do you think of what you've heard so far?
Well, firstly, David, thank you very much for that
Pleasure.
very in-depth history class. Clearly, my high school teachers did not do me and my class justice. I just took down two things that I guess stood out to me when you said, one, that racism started in the law. Because, I mean, again, we're not really taught this in school, the whole concept of racism, yet you grow up and you experience it. You experience it in different aspects of society. You look at, and I have to be very blunt, you look at the junior sect schools and they are predominantly black, and then you look at schools like Providence and St. Joseph Convent.
Prestige
and
schools.
The prestige schools. And you notice that at a different time, hue.
Yeah.
I love that way, that different
and it's
hue.
changed so much within the last 30 years as well. They used to be all white,
Exactly.
apart from scholarship winners.
No, but we developed different shades of white in Trinidad and Tobago. I don't know if you remember the time we went through the nightclubs where we had the high browns,
Right. Well,
which were qualified blacks. And we have to have that whole conversation. Finish
Yeah,
it.
no,
Well,
I need to
finish
finish this. I need
Finish
to
it.
because
No, but just the
Brother, no, I'm gonna put all that
different
in the
shades
tape.
of white. Technically, the
I remember,
statement
I'm coming
different
back
shades
to
of
you, I'm
white
gonna
doesn't
finish.
exist. There are different shades of black,
Listen,
right? But there's no
listen.
such thing as different shades of
Glenn
white.
Davis, the comedian, did a show in Queen's Hall called Two Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I'll never forget that show, because in the show, in that play, he was Superman.
Right.
And other people were coming to Superman, who was also the prime minister of the country. I don't think it was Trinidad and Tobago, but I know he was referring to Trinidad and Tobago. And it was prior to 1986, which was a real revolution when we switched from the PNM of 30 years. And he was talking about, and he made a joke, and the place erupted in so much laughter. He said there are people who are protesting, Sissons and Penta, who have brought out whispering whites, but they didn't bring out one whispering black yet. Finish your story.
You said that racism again started in the law, and for me, what I took away from that, I'm just looking, 1962 go forward, and you have seen where it has basically found itself in almost every system of state. You see it in the prison system, where Philip said earlier, it's predominantly black African males in the prison system. You look at the school system, the ones who are performing poorly are usually the children of descendants of Africa. Grandchildren of Africa.
I still haven't gotten the right terminology
because
yet.
we have a lot of different, what is the politically correct term? And he also made a comment about the master day done, because I don't really believe it is done, and that's something we definitely
we can remember, see, after he come from them, he said that's why we can make Shalara.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you again for the history lesson, right? And but my takeaway from that is basically, like you said, racism started in the law. So it seems to me that every time a black person tries to progress, they are held back by the law. Basically, they are held back by the law, and that kind of moldy mindset of
know your place. That's what I'm saying. it told you that they go no further than a certain
exactly
point.
To me it feels like, okay, well, because the law is being changed to hold back Africans, okay, well,
I want to
that's
ask you a question. As a young, vibrant, passionate black woman, do you feel in your heart and in your mind that all of Trinidad and all of the opportunities of Trinidad are open to you?
That is an interesting question. Okay, now first of all, let me just say, I have experienced racism. I want to be as real as possible.
You have to be as real as possible.
Yeah,
this show is not called plain talk for a joke.
Yes, no. There have been certain times where I wish I had certain opportunities.
So the answer to my question is no. The answer to my question is no. But you could say what you want to say.
Yes, there are certain times I wish I had certain opportunities. But I feel that because of the color of my skin, because of my race, that I would be held back because...
But it's not just African descendants. The Solo company is owned by the Charles family. Joseph Charles Bottling Works. And his son, Ken Charles, runs the company. But that's not their names. And Joseph Charles had an Indian name. And he was writing British suppliers to supply him with syrups to start a soft drink company. And they would ignore him. And he wrote a letter and he used Christian names, Joseph Charles. And they immediately responded and offered to help him. So that's the history of Trinidad and Tobago too. So it's not just black Trinidadians. But money seemed to have changed the paradigm for East Indians. They developed a wealthy Indian class. How come we never got a wealthy black class?
No, you said not only black Trinidadians. I would argue, yes, only black Trinidadians, because only African Trinidadians have had the law specifically
but the PNM
target
wasn't
them.
power. The same Eric Williams.
Again,
The same
if
Eric
we
Williams.
look at the PNM as a starting point, then we will not benefit from
What
the
was the
foundation
Trinidad
for that.
recalcitrant minority? What was recalcitrant minority? What was the recalcitrant minority?
One of the most misunderstood statements ever made in the history of Trinidad and Tobago.
Clear it up.
Okay, so we had the federal elections for the Federation of the West Indies, 45 seats, 19 in Jamaica, 10 in Trinidad, 5 in Barbados, and either 2 or 1 within the remaining 7 nations. There was a campaign in Trinidad, and the DLP won. DLP won 6 seats, PNM won 4. DLP was representing the wider DLP. PNM was representing the WILP, West Indian Labour Party. And Dr. Eric Williams, after Rujanath Kapildeo at Princess Building Grounds, right less than a stone throw away from here, said, we have to arm ourselves against the PNM.
Mandela Park? No, Princess Building Grounds.
Princess Building Grounds. Right
Grounds.
there. And so Dr. Williams referred to the East Indian community as a recalcitrant minority. Recalcitrant simply means non-cooperative in a stubborn way. And minority...
Because he lost.
Well, yeah, he was venting, but it was
Because
not.
he lost. No,
but it wasn't a racist
but again,
statement.
you see, the two statements that are pinned to Eric Williams for eternity are Massa Dedan and recalcitrant minority.
Okay, listen, do
Because
you
for the
remember
people-
when
because-
Mr. Pandey said, used the word narcissistic in the parliament and was thrown out? Mr. Pandey in about 2000, 2001, when I think it's Christine Kangal who was the acting Speaker of the House, and he rattled off a list of words. This is you're unfair, unjust, something, and narcissistic. And she was like, that's it, out, Mr. Pandey. And then it was only, and the whole country's like, how could he use the word narcissistic? And it's only when everyone picked up a dictionary within the next few days and realized that narcissistic simply meant like conceited
Yeah, but I'll let
or
you
arrogant.
I'll let you run with that, but that is not as...
It's the same kind of thing as
Well,
recalcitrant minority. People didn't understand what it meant at the time, and because it was like a
No,
mystery
but
word
because at
thrown
the time,
at an ethnic
because
group.
at the time that the power controllers in Trinidad and Tobago realized, wait a minute, if we separate these two major races,
Yeah,
to the sugar plantation and the oil field, if we separate them, we will be able to control.
right. Now you're talking.
Okay, so recalcitrant minority was used as that line that scarred
But
the
not by
development of
Dr.
Trinidad.
Williams, by those who deliberately
I
misinterpreted
have to
it
give you that.
as a racist statement.
I have to give you that. But when you said that not just when you
Yeah,
took me to task for saying
right.
not just black
And I say
people,
only
but I
black
want to ask you
people.
this, right? Too many things have been done with the law, with the treasury.
Yeah,
Too many things have been created. URP, DUTE, CPEP, to pull labor off the sugar plantations. Too many things have happened. When she asked about racism existing in the law, we are a country that could go back to the 18th century and pull up a non-functional sedition law for political control. We've never had a government that said to Trinidad and Tobago, we are an independent nation state. Let's have a conversation about what all of us want to be.
right.
Because regardless, and I point this back out there, red, white, black, green, Trinbagonians, regardless of hue, we have a common mindset now where what we want for ourselves and our children. And generally, with all of that, people still have integrated on a national level.
Right. I agree with all of that.
No, but I'm saying that the fact that Shalana could say in 2019, when the People's National Movement, that we tongue-in-cheek acknowledge is the Black Party, has had financial, economic, social, political control of the country, there could be opportunities closed off to her.
I agree with all of
Look
that.
at me. Look at me. She said she experienced racism. I experienced
Right.
racism. I grew up in a multi-ethnic society of Woodbrook. Then I ended up in St. Mary's College, which was a totally different experience. And in St. Mary's College, I was too white to be black and too black to be white, and the Indians didn't claim me, and the couple Syrians that were in the school couldn't because I was half Syrian. So, and I'm not trying in any way to equate my personal
Understood.
struggles with the
Understood.
struggles of the grandchildren of Africa and those who suffered indentureship. But I know what it's like to not fit in, and I know what it's like to feel like you don't belong.
I can
And
appreciate
I
all
could
of that.
imagine what it must feel like, and I've always questioned, for as long as I could remember, if the Black Party is in power, how is it that the black community has the least?
Right, very legitimate question. What my simple concern was with the statement that other ethnic groups have been affected by the law or racism in the law. I am putting it on the table that only African people as a group, as a community, as an ethnicity, have been targeted collectively by the law.
You will defend that statement when we come back from this break. Stay tuned.
Attention residents of San Fernando and environs. This is the voice of the Progressive Empowerment Party inviting you to our public meeting on Saturday, 2nd November, this Saturday at 5 p.m. at Harris Promenade Bandstand. Come and hear Progressive Empowerment Party solutions for crime and corruption, solutions to reduce the cost of living, solutions for more jobs, and much more in our plans and policies. Come hear the leader of the Progressive Empowerment Party, Mr. Philip Edward Alexander, Deputy Political Leader, Anthony Defoe, Party Chairman, Ms. Felicia Holder, Leader of the South Hub, Michelle Davis, as well as a dynamic lineup of guests and an open mic for you, the public. We are here, the Progressive Empowerment Party, to bring that change which you, the citizen, have been asking for. So come out on the 2nd November at Harris Promenade Bandstand and let's start that change. PEP for change, PEP for betterment, PEP for real change.
Antel is Trinidad's most reliable and technically experienced ICT company, providers of quality structured cabling, Cat6 data fiber, and power cables. We also stock cabling infrastructure basket-type cable trays for server rooms and data centers. Antel also installs and maintains video security systems, including cameras, alarms, and electronic entrance locks for businesses and residential properties. Call Antel 674-1406 or 783-9250.
Sale, sale, sale. Boddington and Associates Optical is offering free eye testing along with 50% off all frames and 30% off all lenses. Boddington and Associates Optical, located at number 17 Carney Savannah Road, Chaguanas, and 11 McBean Road, Couva. Info line 671-5342. Call and book your free eye testing today. Boddington and Associates Optical, helping you see the way.
So we're back. And the conversation, I'm sure those of you who were in it with us wanted to hear David defend that statement. But before he defends that statement, Felicia Holder wants to read something into the conversation that I think we need to have, and it might help guide and flavor how you respond, how you finish that conversation, that position that you took, that the law was written specifically to target and control people of certain ethnicity. That's basically...
No.
Say it better and let her go.
Right, I'm saying that African people
are
the only people
who have
had laws specifically written for their disenfranchisement and disempowerment.
Good. Then let's say this.
No, it's not about race, but without having enough population to influence a seat, much less an election by votes, the Trinidad Syrian community has taken control of the nation's food importation industry, the fast food industry. They control the lion's share of supply to the public health sector, the alcohol industry, are closing in on the baking industry, and are almost finished consolidating control of the construction sector. The Trinidad Chinese, whose numbers also cannot influence the outcome of a local election, much less impact the national vote, control vast sections of the supermarket retail trade, entertainment, finance, and own most of the media. Like the Syrians above, they control major state contracts and are massive players in the electrical, plumbing, and hardware industries. Who owns all the car dealerships, the insurance companies, the malls, the real estate development companies, even culture? Who owns all the major carnival bands? And what do the Afro-Trinis have to show for their vast majority and the might of their vote over the past 57 years? Almost 57 years of PNM having social and economic power, trillions of dollars spent by PNM governments on all manner of projects. Why do the grandchildren of Africa, the PNM's base, outnumber all races in number of persons incarcerated, have the lowest performance in education, lowest home ownership, lowest business ownership, yet have the highest rate in homelessness, in drug addiction, death by violent crime, gang membership, matters before the criminal court? What have Afro-Trinis gained from die-hard support of the PNM besides suffering, squalor, poverty, and the bottom rung of the social ladder? Why have none of those trillions and none of those projects been spent on the development of the actual people who keep putting the PNM in office? Walk, Mover, Beetham, Laventille, Sealots, Covine, Bagatelle, Mason, River Estate, Factory Road, Rich Plain, La Puerta, Sanganga, Carenage, Abbey Pujad, Navidity, Gonzales, Belmont, Cokereet, Waterhole, Harding Place, Scorpion, Big Yard, Nelson Street, East Port of Spain, and ask yourself, if this was never racing and the PNM only wins because of the Afro-Trini vote, why do the Afro-Trinis end up with the shitty end of the national stick? Walk Goodwood Park, Glencoe, Bayshore, Shorelands, West Moorings, Columbus Circle, Goodwood Gardens, Victoria Gardens, Fairways, Sinclair, Valsine. When the elections are over and they say they win, who is the they that the mass of PNM supporters think wins? 57 years of PNM control of the public sector and 41 years of PNM control of the Treasury and Legislature. What have PNM supporters to show for all those decades of support as compared to everyone else? If the well-being of all citizens is the responsibility of government, and if one sector is failing compared to all the rest, shouldn't the government have a responsibility to have a national conversation as to what is required to change those realities, to undertake social interventions to lift all people to the same basic standard and give everyone a chance at a real contributing life? How long does it take to ensure a minimum wage is a livable wage? To secure this nation's tiny borders? To secure this tiny nation's borders? To regulate banks and ensure that they treat their customers fairly? Or to make the education system functional so that it leaves no student behind? How long before the development of people beyond need and labor to development and goals becomes a national conversation? How come that has never been done despite the PNM having had control of the country for almost most of its independence existence? There's a Turkish proverb that says the forest was shrinking, but the trees kept voting for the axe because its handle was made of wood and they thought it was one of them. When the numbers are counted and they say they win, what do PNM voters think they have ever won? Politics and elections will never offer a solution to the true circumstances of this nation until the supporters of PNM wake up to the reality of what exactly they give their votes or their apathy to.
You can stick a pen right there.
There's the end here.
No, but you can stick the pen there because that makes the point. And you said, before we took the break, that laws were written specifically to control the future and the fortunes of the African community. Who, how big I write it, dictates the law? Who in Trinidad and Tobago is more powerful than the legislature that the PNM has controlled for most of our 57 years? There is no queen, there is no king. There is not supposed to be a single individual or body that dictates the elected House of Representatives and the legislature and the laws that it writes and repeals. So I ask you, who?
Philip, I want to say that that is a very magnificent piece that you wrote. I agree with just about everything in it, except just one little issue with education, where we say our educational underachievement is in larger numbers. We populate the schools that don't do well. But when we are in the prestige schools,
We do really well.
we do exceptionally
Yeah,
well.
but you see,
You
no,
make
no,
a
no,
point.
I'm not
You
even
make
talking
a
about
point.
that.
you can't say that because I want to tell you
That's
something.
by the way.
No, but if you
That's
say
not
we
even what I'm
populate
talking
the schools,
about.
if you say we populate the schools that don't do well,
Right.
but it's the same curriculum, it's the same Ministry of Education,
Right.
it's the same funding.
Yeah.
How do some schools not do well?
Okay, yeah, I understand that.
No, no,
but
no.
but what
People
I'm
are
saying
going
is,
to watch this.
no, the way that is
100,000
worded,
No, but
the way
100,000
that is worded, it suggests
My lord.
that people of African descent don't
Wait,
do well.
These two young ladies, they were just in the education system. How is
So
it?
I'm just clearing that. I'm just clearing up that
100,000
point.
people going to
That
watch
when we
this
are
show.
in the prestige schools, when we are in the prestige
And that's a
schools,
point that we're
on a level
making.
playing
And that's a
field,
point we're
that we
making.
do well. Right. So let's move on from that.
So you agree?
and
you
like
don't
I
like
said,
us
I agree
wording.
with everything
he
in
agrees
there.
that when the playing field is level,
And that's what
that-
we say.
and that's what we're talking
Right,
about.
right.
That's what we say.
But that's not even a point right now. What I'm
How
saying is,
could you say that? Do you know
Philip.
that 7,000 people fail out of our education system every year?
I'm aware.
That come away from 10 years of the best years
Right.
of their lives
Okay, so-
with zero to show for it. What percentage of that 7,000 people do you think are black?
Philip, I'm gonna put a bookmark on the education discussion because that was just one little
Stick a
point.
pin.
Because when we're talking about the original,
Let's come back to the
consent-
law.
right?
Who writes the law?
So let me start over by saying that was a magnificent piece. I agree with all of it except the education part. We're not going to talk about that.
We'll debate that
Right,
another time.
another time.
I'll have you with our education crew.
Lovely.
When we're going to have that panel, and you'll come back and we'll
Great.
take that apart
Great.
then.
But Philip, that doesn't change not one bit
That the law was written.
of what I said.
No, it doesn't.
That
But,
no. By using that to counter what I said about the law has exclusively targeted African
I'm not
people.
countering you. I am saying to you, if you can say to me
Right.
that laws have
Mm-hmm.
been written that specifically target people of
Right.
African
And the
descent,
PNM have been in power for 57
I am
years.
asking you whose job it is to repeal them.
Right, but I am saying to you that you are saying that as if our first law was written 57 years ago and that we did not inherit
That is-
a system
We
of
You just
Hold
told
on.
me that we repealed in 2011
uh-huh.
a law.
One out of how many?
Right,
So
but
we-
Have you ever? Do you know how
Sorry,
many laws there
David,
are? We're
I
talking
have to
about
jump
over
in now.
1,000
I,
laws.
David, I have to jump in
Yeah.
now. We have, okay, how many laws you said? We have over 1,000 laws?
Thousands probably.
Okay, but hold on. If we have noticed that as
Yeah.
a society, if you have admitted that everything that we just read in that
Yeah.
excerpt is correct, if we have noticed, Shalana just said it, I have experienced it as a black woman, the disadvantage that you have, you're told from young, you have to work
Right.
extra hard because
Yes.
if you don't go to a prestige school where the other girls with high color go to, that you wouldn't succeed in life. If we know all of these things, why
Why haven't we
haven't
fixed
we
it?
fixed it?
Okay, right. Well, we can talk
Stick
about
up in
that.
Shalana want to
We
say
can
something.
talk about that.
Shalana
but
want to
is
say,
different.
Shalana wants
But
to
that
say
is
something.
different to the original
She
point.
not
of
as
the bill.
powerful as us, so she needs me to clear space for her.
Okay, so you all
So
are
I have to
basically
quail
saying,
space.
right,
Quail
that
space in
the
this
law was
conversation.
designed to hold back African people.
He's going to clarify that.
Right? So basically, y'all are trying to say that the job of the predominantly black party was to ensure that black people had a place in society.
Yes!
More than that. More than that.
It hasn't happened.
No, more than that. Hear this. Let me put this to you as plain as I could. If the PNM only exists because of the black vote, and the PNM does not make things at least equal, he said level play field. I absolutely agree. I never advocate for a handout. I always call for a hand up. Why is it that the voted black party does not return the favor? And why do people of African descent in Trinidad and Tobago not realize that it is not the power of the treasury that they need, but the power of the legislature that writes the laws. Explain to Trinidad. Yeah.
Sorry, I was in a. I know. Sorry, this is
You're
that
doing
writes
that.
laws
I
that
wanted
tell
to-
the banks that you give loans to young
Yeah.
entrepreneurs, young black
More than that,
entrepreneurs.
deposit
who want-
the interest.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I paid more in interest to the bank than I made 1 month, and that is just absolutely absurd. Because if I leave it that way, my account is completely depleted, and nobody's asking these
We are
questions.
asking.
Well, exactly. Nobody on the
Right.
outside, and we are asking these questions.
Now-
Why
now-
is it so?
Now,
Okay.
now,
The
now,
thing
now
is,
I
but-
bring in. Sorry, please.
Sorry. Okay. Well, for me as a black woman, like I said, I wish I had, all of the opportunities that a lot of people basically get handed to them, like inherited. But for me, I feel like I have to start from scratch and work my way up. So I feel like I have to work 10 times hard, which I am willing to do. But I feel like
No, I can't let you say that. I can't let you say that like if you need to say that. I want to tell you that what you need to say is that's bullshit. That you are supposed to have a level play field, that regardless of your race or your class or your religion, your orientation, any separation or divider, you as a Trinbagonian supposed to have the same access to all of the same benefits as everybody. Because if that is not so, our entire government is guilty of sedition.
so basically as
I want to say that again. If that is not made to be so, our government, by continuing it on, Trinidadians need to understand what David is saying, and I'm pushing him to say, that it is the government's job to write the law. The police service exists in Trinidad and Tobago because a law speaks it into being. The 41 seats in the parliament today could write a law that outlaws the police service. The parliament, the legislature is the key. Trinidad has a nonsensical economy. We have 22 billion US as a GDP. Singapore, that is half our size, has 322 billion US as a GDP. They don't have gas, they don't have oil, they don't have pitch, they don't have tobacco. Our legislature is failing us. And the people who vote, the people into the legislature, have to start to take responsibility for that. They will defend your law.
Right, now let me say this. And this is where we will depart, not where we might differ. This is where we are at the crossroads right now. I'm about to go this way, y'all are that way. This is why.
Should we take
I-
a break?
Should we take I feel like I'm gonna
speak from personal
Master
I mean,
Control, Master Control. You think that should be a break?
It's no secret.
Master Control, say continue.
It's no secret with me. This is why I have never voted. This is why I don't support any political party. And this is why I have no faith in the system. There are many of us who are convinced that a political party can solve our problems. A political party most certainly can help. But the kind of unrealistic expectations that we have about the politics, one, and then on the other end of the spectrum, the kind of misrepresentation of the capabilities of the politician that they throw back to the public, that toxic combination causes us to remain within these 5-year cycles,
I'm going to have that challenge.
repetitively expecting all of our problems to be solved.
We're going to discuss
None
that.
of
No,
these
stick a
problems,
pin
I
for a
believe,
second. No, stick a
can
pin
be
for a
solved
second. You
with
say that,
politics.
right?
Yeah, that's my
You
view. That's my view.
And it is a correct view if based solely on what we've had as an experience. But there are countries in this world that work.
Not to solve the kinds of problems that we're discussing.
Listen to me.
That's beyond politics.
That is not true. Because we've allowed it to become this in 57 years does not mean that we can't take responsibility for them fix it. Norway have $10 trillion in the Heritage
Right.
Fund.
We could fix the economy,
Sir.
but all of our problems
Sir.
are not rooted in the economy.
No, they're not. And that is why if you look at the way us as the Progressive Empowerment Party approaches the national conversation,
Right.
we approach it from the point of view as needs must be met. Human beings have needs. We understand that as a people, but then we approach it from the position of, well, this is how it is. I had to manage that. Shouldn't be so.
Right.
The
And
obstacles
that
to
is
her
where I
development.
depart
You
from that
said
too.
you never voted. I'll tell Trinidad and Tobago something. I grew up with a fellow named Rocky Garcia in Woodbrook. Grew up with him. Storm Oval for cricket. We thief a policeman bicycle together.
Say not on air, boy.
I say not on here. Me and Rocky Garcia's little boys, we get licks in both houses. Rocky Garcia and myself. Rocky was the candidate in Diego Martin West that the Congress of the People sent up. And Rocky Garcia, to me, at the time in 2007, I believed, given the choices of him and Keith Rowley, I had to vote for Keith Rowley. And I was a member of the Congress of the People. Because at that time in 2007, that was following on Keith Rowley's big revelation in the parliament when he told, and he hoodwinked us all, when he told us, I went to the Prime Minister in August 2003 and told him about massive bid rigging in UD Cotton. We looked at this man as a champion. We saw him as a bomb to detonate in the corruption of this country. He turned out to be the opposite of that. But in 2007, given who the COP candidate was and who the PNM candidate was, I had two choices. Don't vote and remove myself from the system, which I disagree with. Because I believe I don't have to support my party if another party send a better candidate. At the end of the day, I believe in the power of 41 representatives of 1.4 million people to actually do the job. We've never had it. But that doesn't mean that we stop believing in it. The system is there. What we advocate as a political party is so revolutionary to this country. It will change the way everything is done and fix itself like Lego pieces going forward. Just the Constituency Board of Supervisors, just that decentralizes cabinet authority back to the constituency, gives them the autonomy to run their schools, their healthcare, their water, their electricity, their roads, sidewalks, pavements, whatever. Run your own stuff.
But those are limitations.
Not just that. We say by law, no public works should be done in any constituency from any company or by any person not from that constituency. So no more Junior Samis and Calcos and Kusals rising as super contractors. Because the average thing that we build in Trinidad and Tobago, the average contractor could do. And I know, because I put it out yesterday, Junior Sami was a one backhoe operation, Northern Construction, Ishgal Baransing, Calco. If you stop all the Calco trucks and peel off the Calco sticker, you see Junior Sami. Peel off the Junior Sami sticker, you see Kusals. Whoever government in office getting all the contracts, the truck owners come in, put your sticker on me.
Right.
I'm saying to you, there are things that have to be done in Trinidad and Tobago to level the playing field. We need to understand our economy, have a vision fit that incorporates the development of all of our people. Tertiary education. We're grinding out lawyers we have no use for. But we need masons, carpenters. You talk to any contractor and they'll tell you, you can't get plumbers, you can't get electricians, you can't get masons, you can't get carpenters. We are not producing the amount of tradespeople we need to develop the country that we need to develop. Singapore is half the size of Trinidad and Tobago. There are 5 million people. We have 1.4. Our population needs to grow. Where are they going to grow to? How are we going to grow them if we can't develop infrastructure for that? And to develop infrastructure for that means you need infrastructure workers, or we have to go and bring in people from Venezuela.
It's inevitable. It's already happening.
A plan, David. A plan.
Right.
A plan.
But
a proper plan.
Right. But now, all of those are very good ideas, and I hear them all the time from you. Grand ideas. But from where I stand and what my work is, I don't think there is a solution to multiple problems by voting. Not at all. One case in point of several. A sign was just put up at the top of Charlotte Street by the Park Street corner saying Chinatown. Many people of African descent have expressed concern about it. There have been little protests and so on and so forth, right? And I could relate to those. I respect those protests because in Port of Spain we still have streets named after Frederick, Henry, Charlotte, George, Nelson, Duncan, Piccadilly, Abercrombie, Chacon. We still have Duke, Queen, Prince, and on the west side we have Baden, Powell, and Kitchener, not the Calypsonian. And we still have a highway named after two warlords.
Kitchener named after the same person that the street is named after.
Lord Kitchener.
Lord Kitchener.
Street. No, named after the British Lord.
I know, but I'm saying the
Kitchener.
Calypsonian is named after the same thing.
I know, but the street wasn't named after the Calypsonian. Yeah, of course. Yeah. Now, and then we still have Churchill, Roosevelt, Harry. A lot of people in this country think Churchill, Roosevelt is one man.
Yeah.
Right. Two warlords who authorized the dropping of several thousands of tons of bombs on innocent people. So we still have all of that in place. We renamed Chinatown. I could relate to the complaints. But Chinatown has been made an economically successful zone by wages and salaries that were earned by African people. And so that sign that went up there, it was already Chinatown. But what made it Chinatown was poor black people's money. And so the sign was just the icing on the cake. Now, the same poor black people who have...
How is the sign the icing on the cake?
Because it was already Chinatown before. They didn't launch Chinatown
I know,
on that day.
Trinidadians get caught up in stripping their Syrian tongue, Veni tongue, Chinatown, it doesn't matter. Let's talk about Carnival. How
Right.
come all of the major Carnival bands that was a result of an African tradition and an African response are not owned by people of African descent?
Right.
How is that
Right.
possible?
Because of the whole French Catholic influence
How is
in it.
Synergy TV, that is a show that targets people of African descent, not owned by Africans? How is it that all of the urban radio stations that pander to
Understood.
people are
Understood.
not? So I don't even...
Understood.
Chinatown is the latest and not even the most
Right.
important.
But my point is that it's poor black people's money who have made the Syrians rich, the Chinese rich, the local whites rich, and the wealthy East Indians rich. But there's no business that poor black people's money has empowered in the same way. Who can I vote for to solve that problem?
The Progressive Empowerment Party. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Because we are the ones that talk about a financial services regulation. You see?
No, it has nothing to do
Jeff,
with...
if you let me finish your
All
point,
right,
you'll
sure.
understand, right? Because Shalana, and I have Shalana here, because I think she's going to be incandescent in her life. She is an activist. She takes on issues that the parliament should take on. She takes them on single-handedly at risk to herself. I want to tell you something. If Shalana or Felicia wanted to start a business in Trinidad and Tobago, and they went to the bank to sit down to talk to the bank to get finance, because, and I showed, Sabga was a van salesman, Lockjack was a van salesman, Bull Moose Knox was a van salesman. They end up captains of industry and multi-millionaires. Rahal used to peddle cloth on Queen Street. These people, when they went with their business idea to sit before a bank, generally, or if not a bank, because Mario Sabga Aboud told the world that he built a restaurant a month for 10 years. And I sat there and I watched that and I played it over and over. As a businessman, I've been in business all of my life. And I know when you open one restaurant, you work in 29 hours a day to break even. I'm trying to understand the credit and the bank calls because you're late, you check bounce, people owing you, you owing them. And Mario Sabga Aboud opened a restaurant a month, every single month, for 10 years. How do you get that kind of finance? I said, give that man the Trinity Cross and let him walk through Trinidad and Tobago explaining how you do that. How exactly you build a restaurant a month. And I am being as cynical, sarcastic, facetious as I could. Because the average person going to the bank, and again speaking as a businessman without none of the connections, I have never had it, never benefited from it. So when I go to a bank, I have to make sure that all my I's dotted and my T's crossed, and still that don't help. And because in Trinidad and Tobago there are no financial services, any regulations that govern the operations of banks, what takes place as banks in Trinidad and Tobago is no longer banking, but money warehousing. There is no interest paid on your funds in your bank account today. They'll tell you 0.00125%. And the first deposit that you make or the monthly fee to operate that account wipes out that interest. Wipes it out. What Felicia just said is a fact. Yeah. There are poor people in this country who every single month, because of fees, their account balances are depleting monthly. Because we allow the banks to break the rule and not pay deposits interest. And that is so critical to the development, because you just asked me who's going to change that? By making law, by telling the existing 5 banks, this is what's going to happen. We are going to regulate the financial sector in Trinidad and Tobago. we will come back to a place where banks have to pay depositors interest, because the moment banks have to pay depositors interest, they have to recoup that money. And how do they recoup that money? Through risk lending and credit. And you can't access risk lending and credit now. But I know of bakeries that started up 5 years ago and have 6 branches. And I don't know how they recover their initial investment in the first 5 years to have been opening 5 and 6 branches. And until you have a government in place that is willing to say to you that businesses do not become that overnight, that two shops don't become empires, that they should have an organization in place that supervises where the source of your funds. When I heard Faris Al-Rawi passed a law saying explain your wealth, I said, partner, trouble and worries now. But his explain your wealth wasn't for the people that really should be explaining theirs. His explain your wealth was another law to curtail the development of the lowest class. And the Progressive Empowerment Party says to Trinidad and Tobago that we are capitalists to the bone, but like a rising tide, we intend to lift all boats. We intend to make sure that banks are colorblind, that you don't need connections, that you're supposed to be able to stand. We have an Equal Opportunities Commission that should deal with that. That is what they should deal with. I went to a bank to get a loan and couldn't qualify, even though according to all banking law, I have met the criteria by more than I should. These are things that the legislature and the government are for. And while you may have become jaded and you may think that it is so much, I want to tell you that each and every single problem that exists in Trinidad and Tobago that creates a false advantage for some and creates obstacles for others, the Progressive Empowerment Party have gone through over a decade. I'm telling you from interviews with people, success leaves clues. We talk to all of the minds and the best of the people, and that's why we end up with Plain Talk as a show. Because when we call for a show and we call for people to come and talk about issues, we get the best and the brightest because they exist. And Trinidad could be fixed. All we need is the political will to fix it.
Right.
And that is what we represent.
And those things that you've mentioned are doable. What I am saying, though, is that you cannot vote any political party into office to change cultures that have become so concretized and socially engraved in the day-to-day life of the society that people actually live self-destructive lifestyles based on historical forces and factors that have done perpetual intergenerational injustices to people. I'm talking facts.
David, I have total respect for you. I begged for, well, I didn't beg for you, I made sure you came on this panel because I wanted to address you for some with my own questions. And as much as I respect you, I don't understand when you say things like you have no faith in the system, particularly as a historian.
Look what the system has done.
Okay, but particularly as a historian who has seen change, you have seen us go from close to 300 years of slavery. That was a whole culture within itself. I'm sure the people within that system thought this is never going to end. I'm going to be a slave for life. I'm going to be a slave for life. I'm always going to have
but how did it change? Did it change from us voting for parties? That slavery changed from revolution. There were 62 slave rebellions.
But what we're describing here is a revolution of minds, though, David. A revolution where you understand. No, listen, we're talking about you can't.
Bow to that statement. I vexed you, make it. Tony.
Yeah.
Take a pat yourself in the back for that one. No, but we're talking seriously here where people, we can't say things like that is we have no faith in the system.
No, I have no faith in the system.
But then we're always going to be stuck. I attended one of your lectures. You invited me and I came all by myself, found my way in Laventille. People probably wondering where this girl again lost asking for direction. I came because I wanted to hear and understand, and I believe that you have a very sincere approach to wanting to lift the conditions of black people. But there's one thing I know I said I didn't understand and particularly agree with, and there was a statement made by someone that we as black people need to band together the same way the Chinese communities band together and the Syrian communities band together. I agree with that. We need to band together, but you can't pour from an empty cup. You can't tell the black society that you all need to work.
Dirty, man.
Come on, you're interrupting me. You can't
Right.
tell the black community that you all need to support each other and do this for each. But the entire community as a whole is suffering. And you're saying that politics and voting for politics. I know I don't agree that a political party is going to change things. I believe that the
And that's what I
Progressive
said.
Empowerment Party
Okay.
has ideas, plans, and solutions for making life equal for everybody, for making it that a black person going to St. Joseph Convent will do just as well as a black person going to
Mukarapu.
Mukarapu.
Yeah.
Make it so that the two schools, wherever you go, you have an education. You don't have
Same
to
advantage.
strive and fight up and be clawing your way up. And that is what I felt like personally as a young woman. I had to claw my way up, and I feel a special place in my heart for the people who did not have the advantages as I did. And yes, you have to work hard, but it shouldn't be this hard, David. It shouldn't be this hard.
Or it should be
And-
that hard for everybody.
Exactly.
Right. Now, I
Level
salute,
playing field.
I salute all of you for,
Shalana wanted to
for
say
that position.
Is that
I'm not
Shalana?
arguing with that.
Shalana, what is it?
So it all basically comes down to having the right leadership.
Well, she was asking which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Because you can't say to people overnight, understand that you are the source of your own discomfort and misfortune. That because you failed to hold your leaders to account, because I hear them tear Satmaraj apart, but the East Indian community will cry long tears when Satmaraj is dead. And I'll tell you why. Satmaraj is the front line that protected the East Indian community from having the exact same fate as the grandchildren of Africa. Chinese people have a Chinese association. When they meet to plan how we as an organization with selfish interests, because you have selfish interests. If you do not have a country where people of every creed and race do find an equal place, then the creeds and the races have to come together and defend themselves. And the Syrians do it. My father was excommunicated. He married a woman that was not Syrian. I mean, they that closed off. Nowadays, they play a little game of we open and but that's nonsense. In a lot of these organizations, they are created for internal hegemony. Let's defend the tribe so that the tribe could grow economically. The only thing that the black community has never had is a real leader in Trinidad and Tobago to explain to them the power of their consumption and their labor. If not the entrepreneurial spirit, I mean, because I could list for you the things that black inventors have given this world. So it's not even about that. But your labor and your consumption, you said earlier, and I've said on live videos, not one BMW or Mercedes-Benz could sell in this country if black people stop chewing gum and sucking dynamite. Because that's how the economy works, from the masses up. And the masses need to start. And I keep asking, how could a country this rich in so much, I want to use the word culture because we misuse it for that, but let's use the word culture, could be giving so much of our time and energy and health and money to things like Starbucks. We own Hongwing. We could operate our own. We could, you go to Barbados, you can't bring an international thing to compete with Chefettes.
Yeah. Now,
We need to come to a place.
yeah. I want to respond to something Felicia said, and I think I don't want to be misunderstood in regards to my perception of politics. But that same building that we were at, we acquired 3/4 of an acre of land from the state. We had no money, but we were able, with an ideology, to construct a 6,000 square foot building, which we named in honor of Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, the man who popularized the phrase Black Power internationally, who was born right there on Oxford Street in Port of Spain.
One of my
Trinidad.
favorite quotes are his quote when he went to receive an award in New York City. And he asked them, you plunge the dagger in my back 12 inches, you pull it out 6. You expect my gratitude?
Right.
I'm paraphrasing.
Right,
but you
Malcolm
know,
X said that, and he would have got.
Oh, he was quoting it. He was quoting Malcolm X.
He said it's not progress.
Well, you see,
He
I
said
did
it's not
know
progress
that.
if you stick a dagger 12 inches and pull it out 6 inches. Yeah.
So you learn something. Plain talk does that.
Now, so we built that building ourselves, and we raised in cash, $700,000. But we constructed a building that is valued at approximately $6 million. No one among us had not even $1 million. Here we had a project to pool together poor people's money and create real estate. And if the handful of us who did that could reproduce that same model, say about 10 times across the country, you would see the visibility of the creation of wealth out of poverty, where the ideology that called upon us to do that also called upon us to curtail certain habits.
David, that's fantastic.
Right, but my point is, who do you vote
But I want to
for?
answer your question because I was just going to say this to give you that. You vote for the government that promises to remove the obstacles while you're doing your part. You see, the
Right.
well-being of
Right,
all
and that's and I acknowledge that.
the
Philip.
well-being of the
I
citizens
acknowledge
is function of the
that.
government.
I acknowledge that both of you said that. So there is a political power that can serve as a platform or springboard for many of these kinds of efforts.
That is the only reason for political
Right.
power. Why are you
But
missing that?
political power, it represents itself
No, but why are you
as
missing-
being able to solve all
In
of these
Trinidad and
problems.
Tobago, Benjamin Franklin, and I'm sure about this one, said when the people learn that they could vote
Yeah.
themselves money directly from the treasury, it will herald the end of the republic. And that is our situation now. Because in Trinidad and Tobago, organizations have organized themselves to own and operate the PNM and the UNC because they no longer represent the people who vote for them. The PNM and the UNC represent the special interests that finance them,
Right.
that give them the hundreds of millions of dollars that they get that don't reflect the cost of a campaign. Electioneering in Trinidad and Tobago is big business.
Right, but if we as community organizations begin to empower ourselves by uniting, pooling our resources, opening skills banks and think tanks, and creating our own internal local economy within a community, then and only then will we be able to have influence over whoever is
But how does
This morning, Aquila Bermudez was on a PSA show, and she had to say it to people who told her that forget the government, fix your own road. She said, and what's the point of the government? So I ask you the same.
No.
I ask you the same.
No.
If
I'm
you-
not advocating that we go out and fix the Eastern Main Road.
No, but you
or
just
the Churchill
forget
Road.
that. But you just
But that was going to be my question to you. Okay, so you're pooling together economic resources. That is perfect. Like I said, communities supporting each other. But how does that fix education? How does that fix healthcare? Somebody complained to me that they went on Monto ward and they wanted to know if there was some epidemic. The wards are overfilled with mostly
And
African American people.
Clearly, that is the job.
African
That is the
American,
role of the
Afro-Caribbean.
government.
But how do? But right,
That
but
is the
I'm-
role of government.
we
I'm
need to
not
learn
saying
how to
no.
clean your skin.
I'm
Right,
not
but
saying
then,
no.
then that is my question. But David, that becomes my question to you. Economic assistance within the community is one thing, but there's so many other things that are controlled by the government that are being overlooked.
all right, so let's say
And I
this.
tip my
No,
hat,
no,
as
no,
I've
no, no.
said,
I want to say this. When I
in
said this
those
morning,
aspects, I have no
people
problem with
tell me the
conceding to
Progressive
that.
Empowerment Party's housing policy, where we say for starter homes, we will remove all the VAT, all the tax, all the duty on basic building material. We are helping you yet, you know. We will take out the stamp duty,
Right.
and we will make sure we use existing financial institution that has a wealth of public funds to make available to the smallest people the opportunity to own a home at zero deposit, zero interest for up to 30 years, for up to $1 million. And what that does is it brings the price of housing mortgages down
Right.
per $100,000 to $466 a month. That is government helping you on a massive scale. So you don't have to
Right.
pool wealth. They've removed the obstacles that prevent you from acquiring wealth.
Okay.
And when I
you
said
think
that,
I'm going to argue with
no, but
that?
when I said that, people tell me that's socialism. I said that's socialism. Grand Bazaar and Movie Town built on state land, paying $1 a year. How is that not socialism? How we so quick to peg the isms around when we're trying to defend
Convenient.
foolishness?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just trying to understand everything from both sides, right? So it's basically
We're on the same side.
okay, so it's basically in order for African people to strive and to move forward, they need the right leadership, they need the laws to be changed. However, they also have to create this mindset that they have to put in the work as well in order for us to move forward. is
What are you saying as the work? Because if you're saying hard work, I'll tell you something, eh?
basically trying to expand on what he said.
African labor
country's built on
continues to build Trinidad and Tobago. So if hard work alone was the was how you ended up wealthy,
We should be at the
Laventille
top.
would be the biggest place, more than Goodwood Park. So I want to tell you something, as somebody in business, and I know this, what grandchildren of Africa needs more than anything else is to take responsibility for their condition, to understand that they have a responsibility to the democracy, that they not vote foolishly for trinkets and cheesecake, that they take people to task. The most important thing any political party could do for this country today, the most important thing is to write one law. One. That law is called recall. The right of the citizen to remove from office politicians that they've elected there to do the job. And if you're not doing the job the same way I vote you in, I'll take you out. If politicians, if members of parliament knew today that the fact that their constituents have no water could end up with a by-election next week, bet your bottom dollar you're getting water. And that's why you need to vote into office. So when David asks, and I don't blame him for being jaded, I tell the average person, because I take this licks all the time, I jaded. I don't like politics. I hate that this is what I end up doing with should be the best part of my life. I wanted to tour the world and go and see all the ancient alien sites. I know you don't want to hear that. But no, but seriously though, we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, have everything. When I hear people talk about this country is over, if Trinidad and Tobago was starting tomorrow, with all of the existing debt, with all of the existing barely nothing infrastructure, if you gave me Trinidad and Tobago as it is right now and said run that country and fix it and maximize its potential, we already have a plan for every single thing, to the point where you won't hear us talk about what PNM did and what UNC did, because if you vote us into office, you're relying on us to fix it. So we're taking it forward. At the end of it, we will talk about what we did, what we handed on. Proper education that leaves no child behind, because Felicia said, there is no rhyme, reason, or rationale why Providence and St. Joseph and Holy Dame could be Prestige and Mokorapo isn't. They the same syllabus, the same curriculum, the same teacher pool, everything the same. Everything the same. David said that if you take children who go to Mokorapo and put them in St. Joseph, they do well. So why don't we take what makes St. Joseph, and do that to Mokorapo? That's the better job. You understand what I'm trying to say? Healthcare that leaves nobody waiting and wanting for service. We've given out an ambulance contract that doesn't serve the public. We need to decentralize the authority of the state back to the constituency, so the ambulance service inside each constituency could guarantee, like in New York City, 5 to 15 minutes response time, so you don't bleed out and die. All of those things we have to have as a nation, as a conversation, starts and ends with our vote.
No, yeah, and again, all well and good. What I just want to make clear on my position is that, to me, there is a dividing line between what can and what cannot be accomplished by politics. I don't know if I'm getting from you that you're saying there's no dividing line at all, and that everything under the sun can be solved. Is that the position you're taking?
Let me answer it with this, and maybe this might help you understand. The Progressive Empowerment Party intends to form something if elected to office, and we would ask you to join something called the Activist Council, and it will instruct government, because we have activists in this country for animal rights, for environment, for every type of problem. There are people like your good self who know all of the problems on the ground, and we want to convene people like your good self into an activist council that we could meet with monthly, and that we could measure our development in plans advocated by your good self and others who understand on the ground how we should be fixing it, because government should be most responsive to the ground, to the lowest level. If we are in office 6 months and Riverside Plaza still exists, throw us out, drag us out, because Riverside Plaza car park.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Of course.
Anybody that goes to Riverside Plaza car park and looks at that, and that is allowed to happen, and you just turn right and you're looking at all of the offices of state and all the hundreds of millions of dollars that we spent, and they look at that in the shadow of the cathedral and they see that this is also us, that we don't care. That is what that says. I am telling you, with an activist council advising, because we convene that like a referendum. Tell us, you know how you speak for how you were generating wealth, creating real estate, organizing your community. Imagine if you could have go back to that same crew and said, listen, we now have a responsive government, and we now have greater opportunity to maximize our resources here and to grow forward, taking everybody along. What do you all propose? Because that information, you bringing it back to us and instructing government how to help raise the conditions of the people living in poverty and squalor who have been left behind 57 years now.
Right, and that is another commendable model. But there remains, and I think you've even bore testimony to the fact that there remains a thin dividing line between what government is capable of achieving and what is beyond its control. But in addition to that, when you look at the gray area of what government is not able to influence or achieve, historically political parties have represented themselves as being, not as just being able to do it, but that they will do it within the next whatever fixed deadline is given, 30 days, 90 days, 4 months, half a year, 1 year, however many years. And then the people go along with that. We have had, I think it is 11 elections. Yeah, well, 11 elections in 55 years, including 5 elections in a 10-year span.
Remove the NAR from that conversation and tell me, when have we ever, you see, you make a statement and I want to take it on face value, but if you remove the NAR, because in 1986, that's the only time we ever, as a people, worked together to vote against the established order. And when we did that, there was an attempted coup in the country.
But why?
That's another conversation.
Because of the failure.
You have to stick up in there, because in 1986, we formed the government that in 1988 fell apart. Before
Why?
there was even
Again.
a coup in 1990, before the coup arrived. Again, we can't have the entirety of the conversations that you and I want to have in one hour show.
Right.
But I'm saying to you that look at those 11 elections,
Yeah.
take out the NAR experience, and look at the rest.
You
And
could
we've been-
arguably say
we've been-
2010 was similar with the cooperation between the UNC and the COP.
But
in
how,
that arrangement
how
being
could
good.
you though? How could you? Everybody said, all right, tongue in cheek, close one eye, pretend that the COP is not the UNC.
Right.
Pretend that it's not. Pretend that the majority of them didn't come out of the same party.
Right,
Pretend.
but they won East-West corridor seats that arguably the UNC may not have won by themselves.
I think they won those East-West corridor seats because Patrick Manning didn't allow Penelope Beckles to run, and I think that was a lot of that was a pushback against at that point.
But that's all the way up in Arima.
Yeah, but the
you
country
still
was
had lower down.
The country was fed up of Patrick Manning by then. So when that happened, I think that all of that was just the pushback. So you got all the different things, the perfect storm come together. Those who don't traditionally vote, we will come out and
Right.
vote because we're voting because Patrick Manning and Calder Hart, not that they stole trillions of dollars, but because they tried to take the president's grounds away from mummies with prams. I mean, we get distracted by foolishness, and we
Yeah,
get
it was an over-exaggerated,
Yeah.
misguided rage against Patrick Manning, in my opinion. But
and we overcorrected, and we gave the People's Partnership too much power,
Right.
and we didn't hold them to account. So that's what I'm saying to you. So when you tell me about 55 years and 11 elections, that's no indicator of what we did with the elections. But anyway, I don't want to.
right, but just one point on because in the whole issue of race and politics, and we dealt with the early stages, but it's possible that the mid-1980s could be the most visible example of that, because on race and politics, because on paper, when the NAR won those 33 seats, it was the dream government. It was Lloyd Best's idea, National Alliance for Trinidad and
Why
Tobago.
he jumped out?
Because Sidney Knox hired a private plane to bring Baz Diopande and Carl Hudson Phillips and A.N.R. Robinson to a meeting. See, Lloyd Best said once it gets to that, where millionaire businessmen are giving luxurious holidays to
on
politicians,
that point is
one
where
year
you
before
and I
they won the
agree.
election.
I wanna on that point is where we agree, and I know we've gone way over time, and before I give you a wrap up here, I wanna get you. You need to commit to all the people who are gonna watch the show. They're gonna wanna hear you commit that you're gonna come back.
Definitely.
Yeah. So let's get closing comments, Shalana.
Okay, well, I can say again what I said in the beginning. Racism exists, and I think we have a long way to go with it, right? I think there are a lot of things that need to be done, a lot of changes that need to be made to ultimately end racism. That is something that is very difficult to do, but it is not impossible, right? And I long for the day that some people would not have it harder than some. It would be a level playing field and everybody would have an opportunity, right? So
Yeah. Tony Defoe.
Hey, Tony, you're here.
I'm here. I'm
Every
here.
time we have a guest on this show that takes the ball by the horns, Tony's just sit down there and take notes.
I feel no,
He's just
yeah.
sit down there and take notes.
At the end of the day, I am really happy to have Mr. Mohammed on our cast, as well as Shalana here. A lot of information has been placed into the public space here today, and I do hope, Trinidad and Tobago, that you take heed, you've listened very carefully, and I do look forward very much for Mr. Mohammed and whomever else we do have on that panel on our return show to continue this discussion, because again, this is something that Trinidad and Tobagonians need to hear. We are not sure of our history. It's been kept away from us as a people for generations gone by. I strongly believe that we've been in a situation for these decades, basically, of a level of propaganda that has us in a position of not knowing better for ourselves. Again, really and truly, Mr. Mohammed, I have listened to you very, very carefully today, and you brought up a lot of very, very interesting points, eye openers, I have to call it. But I would say this, where the Progressive Empowerment Party is concerned, you may be jaded where the political landscape is concerned here in Trinidad and Tobago, but I myself was once that way. And not only having to step into the Progressive Empowerment Party and be within its bowels of seeing the truth and reality of what is trying to be created here. We do need the support of Trinidad and Tobago, because what we are doing, our agenda is truly to bring betterment for Trinidad and Tobago, and like Shalana said, create a level playing field, not just for other demographics of the country, but for especially Afro-Trinidadians, because they have held the shittiest end of the stick within the history of our country. For too long, correct. And I think that we need to put special emphasis in that area, especially with that demographics here on the ground in Trinidad and Tobago. And again, it's about bringing betterment for all, like a rising tide, raising all boats. So I would leave it right there. It's a great pleasure having you guys. Philip?
Felicia.
Shalana, David, thank you very much for joining us today. I think this was
Thank you
a
for
very,
having me.
probably the most I have spoken in any of the Plain Talk episodes, because this
That's your
is a
friend, Denise.
matter close to my heart. I will say though, David, I again respect your position. I do believe though, and I know deep down in your heart that you know that there are things that politics and governance alone can fix, and mostly political will. And I would agree with you that the past that we have experienced, we have not experienced a government that has that political will and drive to actually fix and level the playing field. We've been talking a lot about leveling the playing field. We have not had a government. You said we have over 1,000 laws, yet so far I have not seen one come into office that has written a law to make it easier for the black community, to make things easier for the single poor woman in the black community. And I don't want to, again, it's not about me selling the Progressive Empowerment Party, but I have latched on to the idea that the well-being of the citizens is the reason for government. So while I don't believe in you abstaining in terms of your votes, I understand why you do it, but I'm also saying that we can't get caught up. The past doesn't equate the future, you know? So in terms of wanting better for ourselves, I know that definitely we need a government that is committed to doing that. And again, that in my mind right now, in terms of the political landscape, the only government or the only party that is talking about leveling the playing field like we are discussing is the Progressive Empowerment Party. I do look forward to having future convos with you, because I do believe that we can work together, even if from the activist perspective.
Well, I clear the way so you can have last say. So, give us your
Well,
closing.
so first of all, it was a pleasure and a privilege to have been able to spend this time with four of you and the others, in this program. I really enjoyed the conversation. There's so much intelligence here that I appreciate and admire. And my closing remarks will be centered around 1986, where in theory, on paper, we had the best possible government at the time. It's like just before the Premiership season begins, and you see certain teams buy some of the best players, and you say, wow, they're going to do really well. And then Manchester United ends up at the 11th spot.
I just have to add to that. I remember Barcelona one year when Messi had now become Messi and Ronaldinho was at his peak, and Thierry Henry and Samuel Eto'o.
Yeah.
And I remember Tommy Smith, the British reporter, the commentator, he referred to them as murderers row. They win nothing.
Barcelona?
That year they win nothing.
Really?
Murderers row, and that's
No,
when
but it was
Pep
a
Guardiola,
ridiculous blend.
It was too
Yeah.
much talent.
Yeah,
It was too much talent.
From
I was
way
just going to
back.
add to
yeah,
that.
yeah. Real Madrid was the same thing, But sometimes you look on paper, and,
Man City, look how long Man City is. Yeah, but anyway,
but they're doing well. Man City's
no,
doing pretty okay.
but 10 years ago when they started
Yeah,
this experiment,
but they didn't have. Much
you'll come back and you'll
Yeah.
talk sport too. Come.
Re-
Give us a
Remember, just remember, I am the longest serving manager of the Trinidad and Tobago Soca Warriors.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
well
longest
done.
serving
Really?
manager.
Well done.
For
Really?
about come on,
Well done.
Man.
about 120 games,
I'm going to Google that.
35 countries.
Oh, just you say the man.
And also I managed the under 17 team for 2 tours, about 13 games, and the national under 20 team, the Olympic team, for about almost 30 games.
We should have invited you last
To the
week when we had
Yeah, but
the
then-
When we had the
so-
sport
so-
panel.
sports panel. That's gotten some respectable numbers. I
Yes.
think when I checked today, we had 42,000 views. I didn't know that you were into sports.
Yeah, I even worked with Terry when I was first appointed, because he was the head coach at Jablity. So we used to have to bargain for him to release players
So
for the
much
national
good
team.
people underutilized in sport in this country. I mean, we could be doing so much with sport alone. That is a whole show again.
Yeah, yeah,
We'll
yeah.
come back to that.
And
Give
the
us your
whole
closing.
cricket versus football dynamic, because I think for the first time ever in the history of this country, we had a international cricket match played on the same day as an international football match. And it was a disaster, because we also broke a record for the longest winless streak, which is now 13 matches. And 750 people in the stadium for football, while 7,000 for the cricket. That was like a historical low point for football. But, so on paper,
You see, but you could touch to those issues, and this is what I don't understand. Why you would say, because you know Terry Fennick, and you know that if you get the right people and the right resources, if you encapsulate just that, and you get a vision and a plan for Trinidad's football, you know that you could take it somewhere. That's what leadership does, and putting resources to work where they need to be. If you could believe that for football.
I was
Why
trying
not
to
your
pull away from the
country?
football metaphor. You're bringing us back.
No, you-
Because then we might now start talking about the upcoming game this weekend.
announcing, now take your ad.
No. I'm talking about the Premiership.
Oh,
Yeah, because I like Chelsea this year. Yeah. But
we have a meeting in San Fernando coming this Saturday at 5 p.m. on the promenade, Felicia. And we want to formally invite you and Shalana to come down.
okay, well we could talk about it, because I'm lecturing at a university.
Well, let's shamelessly plug it to everybody else watching.
No,
This
it's-
Saturday coming, we have a public meeting on the promenade in San Fernando. It starts at 5 p.m. Bring the friends and
4
family.
p.m.
4 p.m. Bring the friends and family. David, your closing comments is a show by itself.
I only mentioned football to talk about,
I
like, on
know,
paper,
man.
1986, and that
Dream team, though. Once you
it
reach
was.
dream team, yeah.
It was, and apart from the individuals, the whole campaign was incredible. Bunny versus Fox, and I was a child going to Trinity College and I was enthralled by it. I was entertained.
My home was Clive Panton's command center. So we were answering phones and stuffing mailboxes. When the NAR won, I was on top of roof in Dare Street in town at the NAR tiny little headquarters. You remember what that was? And yes, I know exactly how you feel.
I was actually going to school across here, I think, when Daniels was. No, it was at Trinity at the time when NAR won. But what we saw that followed was, and I mean, it's not for me to single out any government, but
The failure of the human condition.
To me, it was the worst 5-year period we've ever had, because we introduced VAT, we took away the 10%.
Okay, wait, but the
living
economy was a
allowance.
mess. What the NAR inherited from George Chambers that Eric Williams died and left behind was an economy in free fall,
Right.
facing a recession, a global recession, the collapse of oil. It was the first time we
Yeah.
learned the real vicissitudes of
IMF
the. We were
World Bank.
knocking on the IMF doors. A lot of people
No,
said it was.
I don't know if you're aware, there's an individual by the name of Davison Boodoo, a Trinidadian, who was employed by the IMF, who resigned from the IMF in 1988, and his resignation letter was a press release. You could Google it, Davison Boodoo, and he said he resigned from the IMF because the IMF was rigging statistics with Trinidad and Tobago's economy, which caused a devaluation of the dollar. Because we went from 2 to 1 to 3.6 to 1 to 4.25 to 1 to 6.3. And then around 6.3,
brutal time. It
we
was a
stayed
brutal time.
we
We
stayed
stayed
at
there for a
6.3 for almost 20 years.
Well, we had 6.77, but we pretended we had 6.3.
Yeah, 6.77, that is it. But what followed again was, and in the memoirs of A.N.R. Robinson, he writes of his interaction with Basdio Pandey. And Basdio Pandey, as Minister of Foreign Affairs, said to him, we need to have state boards of 100% East Indians. A.N.R. Robinson said, but we can't do that. Basdio Pandey said, but prior to the NAR, we had state boards of 100% Africans. A.N.R. Robinson said, okay, that may have been wrong. So what we need to do now is have 50% Indian, 50% African. Basdio Pandey said, no. If we had full African boards before, we should have full Indian boards now. And that A.N.R. Robinson details that whole transcription. And then 1 year later, 2 years later, 1 year later, Club 88 is formed. And then 1 year after that, the UNC is launched out of Club 88. And then
In
1 year
around
after,
summer,
and then 1 year after that was the coup. And even in the build-up for the coup, St. Vincent de Paul, Salvation Army, Dennis Solomon, all these statistics about
What
how bad
was
the
the name of
economy
the
was
organization
doing.
that come together?
SOPO, some of the people's organizations.
David Abdullah was
David
involved in that.
Abdullah, Father,
Harvey.
no, not
Harris?
Father Harvey, no, Anglican, Canon Ollie Clark, and several others. And they marched. Of course, Imam Yassin Abu Bakr was involved in that as well. And they marched, and then the rest is history. So, if we
But
could
that
have a dream
1986
team,
collapse, yeah, but the dream team, okay, we got a dream team, but it was our first dream team, and we used the best personalities that we had at the time to make our dream team. At that point, the economy was in shambles. We made a joke of George Chambers, following on the 1980 first international style campaign that the ONR did with Carl Hudson Phillips, and it started to bring people who traditionally did not vote back into the conversation. So when they, who became what we call now the floating voter, jumped into the conversation with the then ULF and the DAC, and
Alliance.
it started to become a thing.
Tapia House.
But it was a clash of egos, and it was a collapse of personalities because Basdio Pandey and
But there wasn't a clash of egos in the alliance.
no is
There was a clash of egos after they got power. Because the alliance were on their own. And again, there was an experiment in the 1983 local government elections where they thought to themselves, well, wait a minute, ONR got 21% of the votes in 1981, but no seats. ULF got about the same number of votes with 8 seats. So they thought to themselves, if we combine the two, what could happen? And then they did that in 1983 for the local government
government,
election.
yeah.
And they said, aha, let's try this. It was an experiment.
Yeah.
Just like how we've had 3 elections in this country, including the last election that we had, the last local government election, where PNM won 83 seats, UNC won 57 seats, but UNC got more votes than PNM.
But the ONR experiment, the ONR came second in every seat.
Right,
And
but
won
didn't
not
win
a
any
single
seats.
So yeah, that is the silliness of our system, I guess. But we have to accept that.
But if you could extract all the
But if the
good from all
public-
of that
no,
and
but
form
if
a
the-
government
but I
with
wanna
it,
tell
and
you-
then that government collapsed, not even last 5 years.
David, but you recall legislation that is overdue to be passed into law. If by 1987 we realized that it became the Panday Robinson Ego Fest, don't you think the people would have interacted and intervened?
If they
Don't
had
you think
a, if they had
an
a,
opportunity and ability, the system allowed for it. We vote elected dictatorships into office and wait 5 years.
But
We
that's
have
what,
no
that's what Maurice
power.
Bishop was able to do. Maurice Bishop in Grenada for the Grenada Revolution used to have weekly meetings with his whole cabinet sitting behind him. And he said, in all these surrounding Caribbean nations that are criticizing us for being communist/socialist, they didn't say communist. He said, they have to wait 5 years to change their governments. You can come here to this city hall every week. And if you raise a matter that one of my government ministers cannot answer, we could replace them on the spot.
Absolutely.
But of course, Grenada was invaded.
Another conversation, David. I
Yeah.
feel we're gonna put you as a co-host on Plato, but we have to wrap. So give us your last couple minutes.
Right, so I want to go back to 80 now. So it was really enjoyable being here. I look forward to coming back. And, you know,
Yeah, it was overdue. This conversation. was
yeah,
overdue.
yeah. And, you know, the ideas that you share that are good for the nation, I pray that substance will come out of them and that people listening, people who listen to your programs can benefit from what you share. And I congratulate your presence as a party that is raising national conversations of issues that we need to have on our minds collectively. And, you know, I say congratulations on that and the studio as well.
Thanks for that. Yeah. The Progressive Empowerment Party hopes to inform, educate, and empower. We've said that our mission, more than winning an election, is to end up with an educated voter class. People who would then be able to influence what makes up political parties, not just have it foisted upon them. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Plain Talk as a show that is the culmination of a lot of work that's done by Satish Ramsaran, who is the head of PEP Media, and his team, including Baxter Cuthbert. He's now gotten Maurice Downs and Raphael Banfield as his interns and Jedi trainees. So hopefully we'll be able to expand. The next time David comes here, who knows, the studio might be a little bit bigger. We're working on that because we have another show that we want to launch. And all of that's happening all at the same time. I wanted to tell him, but I wanted to say it, but I didn't want to rain on his parade and tell him that we are also an example of people coming together and pooling their time and their effort and their energy and their resources to make things happen. Because I couldn't tell you who did what in this studio, but I saw it build itself in front of me. We have 5 offices now, and we have an office in New York City, and is concerned citizens and civic-minded people and patriots that's coming together and saying, listen, we like what you all are saying, we like how you're approaching this, we would like to add ourselves to the conversation. That's what we need, that's what we always needed. That's what politics is, of the people, all the people. It comes from the people. If we want a better nation, we could be that. It's up to us, all of us, to stand together as one people under one flag and make this a reality. David Mohammed, your vast wealth of knowledge is the reason why we wanted you on the show today, and I thank you for coming. Shalana, I mean, you're a bright spark, and I look forward to plenty more from you. And as Felicia said earlier, we're not going to stop trying to get you on board the PEP, get you on board because we need you. Of course, Tony and Felicia, they've become household names now. Trinidad and Tobago, the better country that we want for ourselves and our children, our loved ones, is ours to have. We need to wake up and take responsibility for it and start having conversations about how do all of us get better together. We could do it. Until next time, this has been Plain Talk. Stay safe, Trinidad and Tobago.